What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Chop Shop. Trey Wingo here with my work wife for 15 years at ESPN, Mark Schlereth. Stick, we got a lot to get through as we're going through this sort of, well, you know me. Like I categorize the NFL year in 4 seasons. There's the preseason, the regular season, the postseason, and the player procurement season. And we are way deep into the player procurement season. We have a lot to get to today, including the 17-game schedule, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I think first and foremost, we need to talk about some of the moves that were made over the past week by the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins suddenly did some things that we haven't seen over the last 2 or 3 drafts. Massive movement in the top 10 picks. And they trade away a pick and they get a pick. And essentially, to me, they stockpile picks for the future. And there's a couple of ways to look at this. Number one, they're very set on Tua Tagovailoa as their starting quarterback going forward. Or number two, if, and it's a big if at this point, all these allegations are cleared against Deshaun Watson, that they have the ammunition to go get him. And the latest reporting from Jenny Vrentas, who did an amazing article on that, suggests it may be a little stickier than people realize. But Miami has done a masterful job of sort of working the board to give them the maximum leverage.
Yeah, they certainly have. You know, what's interesting to me is you're talking about trading, and go to San Francisco as well. You're talking about trading unknown commodities for unknown commodities, right?
Yeah.
Like you're trading guys that you don't know if they're going to be any good. Like none of these guys have put a squirt of piss in the NFL bucket, and yet trading unknown commodities for unknown commodities trumps regular season basketball, hockey, the March Madness tournament. I mean, it's amazing the power of the National Football League in the offseason. But here's what I'll tell you about Miami, which is really interesting, Trey. I was doing an early season game between the Dolphins and the 49ers, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was absolutely surgical in this game. And the Dolphins they hung about a 50 burger on the Niners, right? It was absolutely ugly. And so going into that game, I had a Zoom call with the Dolphins and a bunch of different players like Fitzpatrick and Van Noy and Brian Flores. I had a Zoom call with Brian Flores. And Brian Flores, I just asked him about Fitzpatrick and Tua. And what he told me at that point was, hey, listen, if Tua was my kid, he wouldn't play anytime soon.
Right.
He's like, he's not ready. He came in with injuries. He came in a rehab state. We didn't have an off season. He basically mentally and physically he's not ready to play. A couple of weeks later, he was playing. And what that tells me, that situation tells me that was not a coach's decision. That was an ownership decision. We'd like to see our new toy. Go ahead and put him out there. And so I wonder if part of that is the belief that, hey, man, Tua, went through some growing pains. He was put in a tough situation. We actually, finished the season with a pretty decent record, even though he bailed us out, or Fitzpatrick bailed us out a couple of times. But I feel like there is not growing concern, but growing optimism within the organization that Tua, given an offseason, given health of an offseason, can really grow into that role. So that's kind of my take on that. I like the Deshaun Watson thing, but boy, I tell you what, the more it keeps piling on Deshaun Watson, the more I'm thinking that it's going to be a while before Deshaun Watson gets an opportunity to play in this league.
It's problematic for sure. And by the way, Ryan Fitzpatrick will be a guest on season 3 of Half Forgotten History on my YouTube channel. Check it out, Trey Wingo Presents, and wherever you listen to your podcast. But he'd said to me, he was crushed when they told him that he was being benched for Tua. He felt like that was his team. And obviously it didn't work out that way. And so he was very disappointed about that. But to your point about the Dolphins, here's what they've been able to do, just so people understand. Here are the next 3 drafts in the first 3 rounds. In 2021, they have 2 first-rounders, a 6 and an 18. They have 2 second-rounders, a 36 and a 50, and a third-round pick, a number 81. In 2022, they have a first-round pick from San Francisco, a second-round pick, and 2 third-round picks. And then in 2023, they have 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, and a third-round pick. And people like grading the trades and the moves already, right? Which I always say, we need to wait because the idea of compiling picks is amazing, but it doesn't matter unless you capitalize on those picks. And you can go back and look at the boatload of draft picks that the Raiders got for trading away Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper. They had 5 first-round picks over the last 2 years. And there's only one that you're really certain of at this point, which is Josh Jacobs, who's a running back, which, by the way, is the most, expendable position outside of, left guard. All due respect.
Right.
In the NFL. So, like, Jonathan Abrams as a safety, maybe, but the rest of those guys have been So
Yeah.
like, I can't say the Dolphins have killed it yet until I know what they've done with those picks. However, I think they've done a masterful job of amassing picks, but the only thing that matters is what they do with those picks.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, we still look at, the first round rate of being about a 50-50 crapshoot. And the bottom line is, like, it's one thing. A lot of people will look at those draft picks and go, well, look, they got X number of starters. I don't want X number of starters. I want X number of difference makers, right?
I want guys that
start that are premier players, not guys that start because we're not a very good team. Hey, you know what? On the worst team in the National Football League, they still find 22 starters every Sunday. Every Sunday. Now, some of those guys shouldn't be playing.
Incredible.
But they still find a way to get them on there. So that's you're 100% correct. Is like, we'll look in this draft, they pulled 3 or 4 starters. Yeah, but they're all average players. There's not a difference maker in the group. And that's how you really have to weigh it out.
Right. So the other thing that's interesting about this is because of what happens with Carson Wentz in Indianapolis. If he plays 75% of the snaps on offense or 70% and they make the postseason, the Eagles get a first round pick. So potentially by taking a $34 million cap hit this year, the Eagles might have 3 first round picks in 2022, which would be a remarkable haul. But again, it only matters if they have a functional quarterback in Jalen Hurts or Joe Flacco, whom you saw in Denver a couple of seasons ago and was not the Flacco that beat Denver in the 2012 postseason or the 2013 postseason, whatever it was, that led to Super Bowl 47. Yeah.
It was 2012 season, 2013 playoffs.
2013 postseason. Right, exactly. Yeah. So, like, I understand why Philly feels good about potentially 3 first-round picks. But again, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. And I love Jalen Hurts. And I think there's the potential for him to be really, really good. But for anyone to say they have a definitive assessment on Jalen Hurts at this point is laughable.
Yeah, there's no question. You don't know exactly what you have. Now, you hope he's trending in the right direction. And, there's a lot of those traits that you see on a week-to-week basis based upon how the guy shows up, how the guy works, how the guy leads his team, like his just overall football intelligence. But you can be really smart on a grease board and not be able to execute on a football field. And so you need to have that ability to execute on the football field. So that is a work in progress. And I really believe, man, it takes for a starting quarterback. So I had this conversation years ago with Mike Shanahan. And he said, when you install a new offense or you become part of a new offense, it really takes you 3 years to know what you don't like. So the only way, like, I'll give you, for instance, I'll just boil it down to, my own stupidity in playing left guard. You know how I learned that you can't up kick a 4 technique? Like if they're in a wide 4-eye technique, how you can't be aggressive on a 3-step drop on that? Because automatically 100% of the time you get turned and you give a short outside corner and a short inside corner, because the guy is so far outside of you. So you know how I learned that? I upkicked in a game to a 4-eye technique and I got my quarterback hit, right? And you're like, hey, dumbass, don't ever do that again. And so you learn through those mistakes. You get into the red zone and there's a concept that you've never really run before, and you throw it and you throw a pick 6 the other way and you're like, you know what? Note to self, I don't like that play.
Right.
And so all of us have those certain plays that just don't fit our eye well, that don't fit our style well, that just don't fit well. And it takes you years to figure out, hey, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I like, what I don't like. And especially it's even a bigger issue at the quarterback position when you have so many other things on your plate than any other position. So it becomes a much larger issue in a much bigger scale.
Speaking of quarterbacks in San Francisco, obviously they moved up to 3. You don't make that move without having your ideas on a quarterback. And I've heard, oh, they love Trey Lance. Oh, it's Justin Fields because he was in those camps with Kyle Shanahan all those years. Or it's Mac Jones from Alabama. I can't speak to any of that, but there's no question they're taking a quarterback at 3 with this move, right?
Yeah, and there's no question they know who they like.
Correct.
So like I get people, and I've heard several reporter guys on the different networks say, well, they like all 3 quarterbacks. No, they don't. Because if you like all 3 quarterbacks equally, one, you're not a very good football team.
And you'd stay where you are and you'd let one of them fall to you.
Yeah, you'd move up to 5 and say, we'd take anyone with Cincinnati and give up less draft capital. So there is a guy on their radar that they really like. I think from Jimmy Garoppolo's standpoint, I think there's 2 things. One, unreliable. Availability is a huge ability. I always say responsibility is the number 1 ability, but availability is probably number 2. And Jimmy Garoppolo just hasn't been available enough. I mean, he has been hurt a ton. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, think about Kyle Shanahan. Yeah, Kyle Shanahan does a phenomenal job with his quarterbacks. He does a phenomenal job of staying in his quarterback's ears and basically saying, this is what we're going to go, and this is what we're going to do, and this is where I want you to attack, because I think this is what we're getting. So think about this. Matt Ryan, prototypical drop back guy, always been a good quarterback underneath the tutelage of Kyle Shanahan, MVP. RG3 turns out to be, now I know that he was injured, and that's probably not fair, but they went to the college system, got his college system, installed part of that college system into what he was doing as a rookie, and he's rookie of the year. The rest of his career, he's been a backup. Now, like I said, the injury played a big factor in that. But and then Kyle Shanahan takes Jimmy Garoppolo and they go to a Super Bowl. So from a coaching standpoint, Kyle knows exactly what he wants. And I will tell you, he wants somebody, to me, that when things break down, they don't look to run automatically. They look to eviscerate you from the pocket. He wants accuracy. Most importantly, he wants intelligence. He wants some athleticism, right? But when you look at those factors, I think the one thing that he understands is to stay healthy and to compete in this league, you've got to have a guy that's not running all over the place, like RG3, who got hurt, in that season. You've got to have a guy that can manipulate, can move the pocket, can slide side to side, and still cut you up from inside the pocket. So that, to me, and again, I have no idea, but that to me feels like more like Mac Jones than it does the other 2 guys.
And by the way, if you look at Mac Jones' numbers, and there's a couple of cool things about Mac, like he had 25 scholarship offers to go start right away, and he chose to stay at Alabama, where he knew he was going to sit behind, at that point, Jalen Hurts, then Tua Tagovailoa, just to wait for his chance. But you're right. And look, I get it. Like, I believe that Patrick Mahomes is going, whether he wins as many Super Bowls as Tom Brady, to me, is irrelevant. I believe he's going to go down as the greatest to ever do it based on his skill set. But at the end of the day, if you look at quarterbacks that win consistently, and I hate that wins are associated with QBs and not with an entire team, most of them come from the pocket. You can argue and you can scream about all that stuff, but at the end of the day, learning how to win from the pocket is what separates the great quarterbacks from the really good ones. So we'll see how that plays out there. But to the point of what you were saying, we're also talking about pro days right now. And I have a wild spectrum of feelings on pro days. If you're a player at a top tier program who has a bunch of games on tape, pro days are the most useless things of all time. But if you're a guy like Mark Schlereth, who went to Idaho and needed scouts to see him, pro days are very relevant. But when I hear from some people that I respect, like Chris Mortensen, saying it's Zach Wilson's job to lose at the pro day, I want to hit something with my forehead, because I'm not saying this is on Mort. I'm saying it's on the people that are saying this to him. If you're making a value judgment out of a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields or a Mac Jones or a Kellen Mond on their pro day, you are terrible at evaluating talent.
Thank you.
Because the game tape is the only thing that should matter. And, you know, I love and respect some people who say, well, there's something to be said for, you know, the pressure of performing in front of your future bosses. You know who performed really well in front of their future bosses? Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, Kyle Bowler, Johnny Manziel. You know what that didn't translate to? Success at the NFL level as a quarterback. So pro days are fun and interesting, but they should never be the deciding factor in determining what your draft position is, unless you're a Schlereth from Idaho or a Milton Duncan from Louisiana Tech or some of these linebackers from Purdue who don't have all the things on tape that so many of the top players have. If you're a surefire first ballot or first rounder, the pro day should mean nothing to anybody.
Right. And if you blow it out of the water and you elevate into the first round, then your scouting staff hasn't done their job. You know what they're doing? They're doing height, weight. They're doing height, weight, speed, draft analysis. They're doing the draft triangle. And then they're using that draft triangle to say, well, hey, he couldn't play, but that's not our fault. Look, he had the height, weight, and speed. You guys must not have coached him well. Everything you need to know, like all Zach Wilson did is confirm what I saw on tape. He's got an unbelievable athleticism, unbelievable movement skills, and unbelievable arm and accuracy in tight windows. That's all he did. He's like, it's a confirmation. I had a coach that I was talking to tell me this. He goes, I don't want to know anything about height, weight, speed, or any of that, vertical jumps or anything. I want to look at tape, and I want to list who my most explosive player is on tape. I like A, B, C, and D. And then bottom line is I just cross-check their numbers. And for me, a corner has to fit in a certain speed range. A safety has to fit in a certain speed range. And he goes, as long as they fit, they could be 2/10 different. I don't give a crap if the guy ran a 4.39 or a 4.46. If the dude who ran a 4.46 is 10 times better football player and is more and triggers better and has better reaction skills and has better ball skills, that's the guy I want. I don't want to get enamored by 4.39 with a guy who isn't as good. And the good organizations understand that, Trey. You know, the bad organizations use that as almost an built-in excuse to be like, hey, listen, we did our job as scouts. You coaches can't coach because the guy had height, weight, and speed.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff along that lines, which is really interesting, right? Because there's a CYA mentality when it comes to drafting players, especially in the first round. Mm-hmm. Well, he checked all the boxes. If he's a quarterback, he was 6'4". He had 11-inch hand size. He threw the ball 65 yards to the hash. So all of this should work. And it's why the hit rate on first round draft picks is way lower than it is on second or third round draft picks. Because in second or third or beyond, all they're looking at is the tape. They're not saying he should be this size or that size or run this fast or do this. All they're looking at is, can he make plays on the football field? And the answer is yes. And that's why you see a Russell Wilson in 2012 go in the third round. Like this is how crazy the NFL is. The quarterbacks in the first round of 2012 were Andrew Luck, retired, RG3, backup looking for work, Ryan Tannehill, maybe somewhat successful on his second NFL team after not doing well in Miami, but none of those careers have come close to Russell Wilson because Russell didn't check all the boxes. They just saw that he played football. And it's amazing. You know this. I've said this to you a million times. I want to draft after the season is done and then when the draft is done in April and see how different those drafts would be when nothing has changed. And it's just more time to put in more data points and do all this stuff. And you mentioned 40 times, right? One thing that's been really fascinating for me to watch this year, because there's no combine because of COVID, all these 40, everybody's running a 4.35 or a 4.29 or a 4.28 or a 4.46. But can talent evaluators really trust those numbers? Because at the combine, it's all set up. Here's this and here's that. I know people that have done their pro days and move the shuttles to where it's not really 40 yards to try and make their 40 time look better. And the NFL and the scouts have lost that sort of control this year because the combine, where they had absolute authority to do everything, is gone. So I'm looking very skeptical, Mark. I don't know about you, at all these 40 times when it's suddenly this season, everybody's faster than we've ever seen anybody before.
Well, I will tell you the other thing that that's different than in my day. And you know my story. I showed up to other people's workouts and begged scouts to work me out. Correct. I showed up to other people's pro days and go, please let me work out. And once I performed well on the pro days, I said, my film is, just go look at my film. I can play. So that's how I ended up getting drafted. But here's the other thing. Guys, as soon as the season's over, guys are done with school and they start training like track athletes.
Yep.
And, they may shave 0.2 of a second off their 40 and they may rise up in the draft, but it's not real. I want a guy that runs fast, reacts fast. And that has to do with how you see the game, the information you take into your eyes, and how quickly you trigger. And, when you're on the field, I don't care if you in shorts and a t-shirt, you run a 4.28. If you're running a 4.63 on the field because you don't know what you're doing, that 4.28 don't mean nothing to me. And so that's a problem, is that we have created or cultivated a business, a cottage industry in how to make your 40 times and how to make your shuttle drills better. So you fool scouts into thinking you're a much better player than you actually are. And again, it goes back to your initial point. Watch the tape, people.
Thank you.
Do your work. Do your due diligence.
Yeah, it is amazing. We have a whole off season now where it's billed, hey, it's pro day season. I'm like 90% of pro day is meaningless. 10% of it is really important. But the other thing that nobody talks about with these pro days is how beneficial it is to the schools, whether it's Ohio State or Georgia or Clemson or, whatever top program you want to talk about. Because you know what they do? They bring in recruits to watch their pro day. And they say, see, look how many scouts are here. Look how many NFL GMs are here. Look at how many VPs of player personnel are here. Right. If you come to this school, these are the people that are going to be watching you. So
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's all about the kids and getting a good education.
Right. Like the Alabama offensive coordinator just got a defensive coordinator just got a raise to $1.5 million, but there's no money to pay the kids. I don't know where we can get this money from to pay the kids.
Yes. By the way, when I got recruited to the University of Hawaii, I went to what they brought us.
Where you should have gone, by the way. Right. We've been over this. You were from Alaska. You had two choices, Idaho and Hawaii, and you chose Moscow, Idaho, whatever. But continue.
Yeah. But when they brought me on my recruiting trip to Hawaii, it's during the Pro Bowl when the Pro Bowl teams worked out at the University of Hawaii. So they'd all bring us in there and watch all the professional players work out on their turf field. And that's when I thought, that was the first time initially growing up in Alaska when I thought I got no chance to play in the NFL. I saw Joe Klecko in a pair of overalls with no shirt on, a cut off short pair of like the Hulk overalls, and I was like, there's no
like Vince Wilfork a few years back with the Houston Oilers.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way I can play in that league. I'm sorry. No. I mean, when Earl Campbell and Eric Dickerson make you look, well, I was a high school kid, but make you look like a junior high kid, you're like, oh gosh, I got no chance.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then there's the other thing, Mark, that has happened this week was the NFL has announced we're going to a 17-game schedule. And there's a couple people and players that have said this is terrible. Two things. One, stop it. You signed up for this. You already signed up for it, so I don't want to hear it. I understand the problems that it will present, but you got the extra money to go with it. So I look, it's like saying I voted for Brexit and then I didn't know what Brexit was, right? Like when Brexit was voted on, this is a true story. When Brexit was voted on, the next day, the number one search in Britain was, what is Brexit? So you do the research before you take the vote. So
Right.
where are you on how the 17-game schedule is going to affect things?
Well, I mean, I look at it like it was inevitable. You knew the TV deal was getting done. You know that the NFL is a license to print money. And as players, you've agreed to it. I mean, you just don't have the power to hold tight. And they know that. I mean, the ownership understands that if we lock you out when the next collective bargaining agreement's over, most of you are going to be out of money by July anyhow, and you need to come back to training camp. So it's the same. It's been this way since the inception of the NFL. So
yeah,
you knew what you were getting into. The way they practice today, the rules, the lack of contact, and all that stuff, it's just different. I, for one, I was like, I don't like it. I don't want to go extra. I didn't like the extra playoff game. You know what? I didn't like them moving back the extra point. You know what? They've been right on all accounts, and I've been wrong on every single one.
Extra point rule is the greatest rule change of all time. It makes things so much more interesting.
I'm telling you, I'm going to take my black socks off and I'm going to get off my porch is what I'm going to do. And just understand that they're smarter than me, and doggone it, I'm just going to enjoy it.
They played the long game and they won. And look, I get it. And we've talked about this before, like the salary cap's going down this year, but the NFL is laughing all the way to the bank because they knew that the NFL television deals were coming up. And people can say whatever they want, but when of the top 100 rated TV shows in 2020, 67 of them were NFL games, they have all the leverage and they can squeeze all they want. So you can pretend like, well, this is preposterous, this is ridiculous. We all know where the leverage is and we know where it's going to go. So we'll see how that plays out. One other thing before we leave, which, by the way, has been a very entertaining version of Chop Shop this week, is the expectations for the draft. Like Trevor Lawrence has already said he's not going to be there. And I think this puts the NFL in a very interesting position because Myles Garrett did this in 2017. And we've seen more and more of potential first-round picks decide, I'm going to stay with my family. Because I think the players are understanding that they have more leverage than they've ever had. And if you want me to go along and be with the dog and pony show, which is wonderful, pay me for it. Not just like send my family there or give me a hotel room. It's a marketing opportunity. Pay me for this opportunity and I will go. And it's an interesting flex by players who are not even yet in the league, but are understanding how much clout they potentially have.
I don't think there's any question, Trey. And the further it goes, I mean, I understand the excitement of draft night. And I mean, I get all that. And it is a really cool thing. And you hosted the draft forever, just phenomenally that you did that. But, ultimately, like you said, there is a marketing opportunity. There are limited appearance opportunities. And you're right. You know what? Hey, man, I want to be with my family. And if you're going to have us move across the country and bring everybody out there, you're going to pay for all that. And by the way, I want to make a couple $100,000 bucks, so if you can put a camera in my face. So I get that. I get that aspect of it. And that's kind of the direction, you just hope that guys understand you take care of yourself, but build your career. Don't just build your brand. Your brand will follow, but you got to build your career. And there's a slippery slope that you're kind of, this juxtaposition of, hey man, I want to maximize my value, but my value is maximized when I'm a great player. And yes. I think that's a hard thing as a young player to figure out that juggling act, and how to say yes. And ultimately, more importantly, how to say no. And I think that's a tough thing for people.
You're exactly right. And two players that I can think of automatically that have done a great job of that. I thought Joe Burrow, as the number one pick last year, understood that, hey, I want to be number one, but I also want to make sure I'm a great player first. And that's the way he handled it. And I don't know if you remember this, but Patrick Mahomes, when he was drafted 10th overall in 2017, didn't take a single endorsement deal his rookie year because he said, I'm not the starter. I'm not worth it. I want to make sure that my play on the field determines my value elsewhere. And clearly, with the career that bleeper has had, for the 3 years he's been a starter has validated his opinion and his stance on that. So that's a very good point. Brother, I could talk to you all night, but I know you got things you got to do. So listen, no, I appreciate you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And one of the great things about the world we live in right now is that we have the ability to do this. So we'll continue to do the Chop Shop. So our thanks to our friend Nita, who puts this together for us every week. I love you, brother, and we'll talk to you soon. All right.
Love you too, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Be good.